Hello and welcome to What's Goin' with Owen and Maggie, with special emergency backup co-host Miles Schneiderman of the Smash Fiction podcast.
I'm not Maggie?
You're not Maggie.
Oh, okay. Bam.
I say sadly. We're glad to have you on. I've actually been wanting to have you on this show since I started it, before I knew Maggie was going to be joining me, so that we would have a chance to talk about today's topic, which is 1990's finest superhero team. Not X-Force, not X-Men, not the Secret Defenders, but the New Warriors.
That's beautiful. Yes. Beautiful first issue right there.
Yeah.
It's funny because I remember back in the day, because I was supposed to be on the Civil War podcast, because you and me and Owen had talked, or not Owen, you and me and Anton had talked about doing that one like a year ago or something.
We had,
I couldn't be on the first episode. I couldn't make it for some reason, and I was just like, well, that's like the reason I wanted to be on, mainly like Civil War. I mean, the movie was great, but like
the movie was great.
I wanted to talk about the New Warriors because I love the New Warriors so much,
and that comic just ruins the New Warriors in every possible way.
Oh my god!
Like, yeah, I didn't read that run when they were the reality star. Like,
no.
But like that's a idea that I like, because I like kind of wacky takes on superheroes like that. Like my favorite book right now is Ant-Man, where Scott Lang is running a superhero security team, and he's got a guy in a bear costume as one of his employees. Like, I love goofy ideas like that, but the way they used it in that story was so gross and so insulting to what had been my childhood favorite.
If it had been done by a competent creative team, then it would have been something. But the New Warriors haven't really had a competent creative team in quite some time. Yeah, probably since the first volume.
Yeah, no. Because the original creative team is Mark Bagley, like at the beginning of his career, and I actually like, I don't like 90s comic art much.
I can see that.
I think he's one of the best 90s artists.
And, he was the Spider-Man guy for a while.
Yeah. I mean, he did Ultimate Spider-Man, which is one of my favorite runs on anything ever. And I actually like his style in this better than I like his style in Ultimate Spider-Man in a way. Like, obviously, the quality of the printing, like, you compare the two, and Spider-Man is technically better, but his actual style I prefer in his earlier work.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. And it's Nicieza, right? Isn't he?
Yeah.
He's there at the beginning.
Yeah.
He didn't last all that long, as I recall.
Did he not? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I think he wrote up to, like, my favorite arcs, though. I'll have to check on that. Because, growing up, I inherited a collection of my dad's. Not the ones that he actually grew up reading, but just stuff he had bought at, like, flea markets and stuff.
Sure.
And so I've read probably the first 25 issues. Up until Night Thrasher's housekeeper turns out to be evil.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Right.
Up until then, I read up to that like probably 100 times, and my favorite is actually the ripoff of Days of Future Past they did, which is Forever Yesterday, which is
Forever Yesterday.
And I tried to read a bunch up until this episode, and I was able to read the first issue. That was it.
Fair enough.
But I wish I
came in. I came in actually. The arc you're talking about, where the housekeeper is evil, that's the big thing that culminates in the big like issue 25.
Right.
And the first issue,
with that die cut cover where you can like open it up and it looks exactly the same, but Night Thrasher's head is like in the center. Or no, it doesn't have like his new team on the other side. If you flip it open, like on the front,
it's got like it's got the two teams. Yeah,
that's what it was.
And I actually picked up. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering this right. I picked up my first issue of New Warriors. I think it was issue number 24. So it was like the issue right before that big one.
Yeah.
And it was all the cover was all the Warriors like lying on the ground.
Oh, and is the puppet string one?
No, it's not the puppet string one. It was they're all lying on the ground, and Thrasher's got one of them like by the shirt, like lifting him up. He's got the blade, and it says "Betrayed by Night Thrasher."
Yeah.
And I picked it up. I feel like I was at like a used bookstore or something, just looking through like Bookman's 10-cent comics bin or some shit. And or maybe it was a comic book store, and it was like their 10-cent comics bin. And I just looked at that, and I was like, well, this looks kind of cool, so I bought it. And that was like my introduction to the series, and it's so crazy because they get such a bad rap. And what's really interesting is that I feel like
for a 90s book, like this was like it is very 90s in that it's trying to be the cool new thing, but it's not like X-Force 90s to where everyone has pouches and everyone's snarling and there's bad art. Like it's actually a very solid kind of playing it straight superhero team.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like, so Night Thrasher is basically the only new character at the beginning.
Yeah.
He's the one that kind of, and he gets so much shit because he's kind of a weird, you know, and especially later when they turned him in, when he looks super bondage in like the reality show era.
Yeah, he does.
But he's like kind of a, you know, bargain basement Batman who, you know, whose parents were killed.
Yeah. What if Batman were the Punisher and was also like black, but he also
had a skateboard?
Yeah, because it's the 90s and because it's being written by a, you know, Nishiyama may not be white. I think he is. Is he Hispanic?
I thought he was white.
I don't know.
Sure.
I assume he's white because he created Night Thrasher, who is a black teenager who rides a skateboard. Because all black comic book characters that were new in the 90s had skateboards. This was just a thing.
Early on, they actually fight the Punisher.
They do, yeah.
And you remember that one?
Yeah.
And it's a great arc. And you get the Punisher's perspective when he's fighting Night Thrasher, and he's like, because the skateboard is bulletproof and
it's
has
got a razor blade on the front.
Yeah. and Punisher is like, God, he tagged me with that stupid skateboard again. And he's like, I called it stupid. It's a shield and a weapon at the same time. Maybe I should get one.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another one of my favorite arcs. That was a good one.
But the rest of the team, good.
No. I was just going to say, because, you know, it's Night Thrasher against Punisher kind of by himself. And and that was
Natasha's here.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, I can comment now.
She is.
Hello, Natasha.
Hi.
I hope you're ready to listen to us talk about 90s comic books.
Seriously, what are you doing to yourself?
Yeah, she's watching it on her phone. Okay.
Nice. Fair
enough. We're glad to have someone. Okay, so we're talking about Night Thrasher.
The rest of the team is all like kind of shitty characters that had been you know, like passed around. So it was Firestar, who was like a New Mutants X-Men side character.
Right. She was a villain, and she actually made her debut in the Spider-Man The Amazing Friends TV cartoon.
Which is the best.
Which is really bad and really amazing.
It's terrible, but I love it so much.
It's a great show to just throw on when you're cleaning the house, and you can just like look over and be like, "Well, they did not have a lot of money."
Right. So it's her, and it's
Namor's cousin, Namorita.
Namor's cousin, Namorita, right? Who was a side character in Namor.
Yeah, for a gender swap, like, you know, kind of side character, she actually is, I feel like, given a lot more character than I would expect.
I mean, yeah, it was, I'm going to be honest, it was the 90s, I was a teenager. One of the big reasons I picked up that first book was because she was in a bikini on the cover, and she was hot. You know what I mean? It was like, she was very much like the kind of sex symbol of the book. But what was really interesting about her is that she had a lot of character development. Like, especially later on, she starts leading the team. And there's a couple of really interesting issues that aren't necessarily great, but they're really good for her.
Are you talking about the one where she gets her short haircut?
Well, okay, that one's fucked up. I mean, that is a messed up episode. Or
she like goes underwater to stop this evil 90s. Well, he's an evil 80s businessman, even if this is a 90s comic. And he's a
deep diver supervillain.
Yeah, he's got this robot suit because he's a businessman in a comic book, and he like beats the shit out of her and like cuts her hair.
It's like the way it's treated strikes me very much as a rape allegory. Like, she's
for sure.
She's like, look what he did to me, and I'm going to get my revenge, and this won't stand. And, to her credit, she goes and fucks him up.
Yeah, because I was thinking for a second that her cousin goes off and fights the fight for her, but he doesn't, does he?
No. He tries to talk her out of it.
Right.
Because he's this whole speech about, vengeance not being good and all this stuff. And she's like, yeah, that's cool. I'm going to go beat the fuck out of this guy.
Yeah.
But what's the other thing that's interesting about her is that, just kind of in terms of her sex symbol status, is that she was one of the few comic book women at the time who was really kind of open about sex. Like, she slept with dudes and it was no big deal.
Yeah, she very much has her own agency, which is very, outside of like a Chris Claremont X-Men comic, is not something you saw much in comics at the time. Like I need to go back and actually reread those issues before I give them too much credit.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of fucked up shit. It's not perfect by any means, but she was always really interesting because you look at her and you kind of expect her to be your typical superheroine wearing a bikini, running around doing her thing, and she's very much not that. She's an incredibly strong character. Yeah. You've got Nova, who of course had his own series for a long time. Okay.
In that collection, I actually had all 25 issues of the Bronze Age Nova series. And that was another one of my favorites. So, I read that and, he's very much, Nova, if the listeners don't know about this, Nova was a character who is straight up a ripoff of Green Lantern. What if Green Lantern didn't have the coolest power in comics? Because he really does. What if you take that away with him and give him the most generic power in comics? You would think it would be a terrible series, but for like a 70s Marvel comic, it was pretty fun. Like, it was kind of my Spider-Man because that's what was in that collection.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that New Warriors was all about taking DC characters and making them not shit.
I'm
only saying that to troll you. But,
right, because I feel like the comparison you could make at the time was like the 80s, like late 80s JLI, which is my favorite Justice League when they were like the funny guys. I'm very fond of that team. Although you hate DC.
I do, but that's okay. I'm just not. I don't hate it, but I just never saw the big deal about Superman or Batman. I mean, Lantern is probably the one that I was most interested in. But Nova is when he first started, and I never actually read those old Bronze Age books, so maybe you know more about this than me. But
I have a lot of nostalgia for them. I don't know that I would say you have to track them down and read them. Like, if you're going to read Bronze Age comics, I feel like the gold standard is Claremont Byrne X-Men, and it's definitely not on that level.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. But he was a very kind of generic, nice guy superhero character. I mean, he didn't have a whole lot going on personality-wise, as from what I've heard.
Well, the thing is, like, Marvel in the 60s created Spider-Man, and he was like the most revolutionary character since Superman, really.
Right.
And ever since then, like, really every decade, they would try and do it again. So in the 70s, you've got Nova. In the 80s, they tried to do it with Speedball, who is also on this team.
That's right. We'll get to Speedball.
We will get to Speedball, because I think he's both of our favorites. In the 90s, you've got Darkhawk, who later joins this team. It very much like the teen superhero with his own problems and his own, kind of a newer twist on it. What 2000s? Do you remember Gravity? Remember?
I honestly wasn't reading comics at that time.
They made a character called Gravity, who's also a teenage superhero, who's like the new kid on the block, and it wasn't very successful. And really, it's not until 2010 with Kamala Khan that we've really had someone kind of live up to that.
And Kamala Khan is the fucking best.
Yeah, Kamala Khan is as good as Peter Parker. Kamala Khan is the shit.
Right, and Nova tried to be that, but it didn't really work.
It did not work to the level that Spider-Man did.
No, and so when he comes back in New Warriors, he's lost his powers at the beginning of the first issue.
That happened at the end of Nova when it was canceled at issue 25.
Right.
And Nova hadn't been seen since 1978 or whatever.
Right, and he's bitter as hell. Mm-hmm. He's going around. He hates his life. He lives with his parents.
He's got a ponytail because it's the 90s and he's the cool kid.
He's talking like Ben Grimm. And I think at the beginning of the issue is where Night Thrasher drops him off the roof, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he finds he can fly again, and he's like, "How did you know I still have my powers?" And Thrasher's like, I didn't.
There was a 35% chance you would get them back. Night Thrasher is such a dick in these early stories.
He's a dick, period. I mean, he's a really interesting guy, but Night Thrasher, I love later on when he leaves the team, it makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. I mean, because they were never his leadership is a major conflict throughout his entire tenure as leader of the New Warriors. It's like everybody always questions him and doesn't want to do what he wants them to do because he views them as a group of soldiers fighting his own personal war.
Yeah.
And these are all people who think they're superheroes.
Because the whole reason this team gets founded in the first issue is Night Thrasher just going around being like, well, I want to fight crime, so I'll just, create my own superhero team. I tried to kill you. You're on my superhero team now. I bribed a hot dog vendor into giving me a hot tip on you. You're in my superhero team. Hey, I threatened to expose you as a mutant. You're on my superhero team now. And everyone kind of rolls with it, but it doesn't mean that anyone likes Night Thrasher. Night Thrasher's a dick.
They go with it because they all want to be superheroes, but none of them are terribly happy about the situation.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that keeps them together is their collective disdain for the Avengers and Captain America in particular.
Yeah.
Because Cap shows up after their first adventure together when they fight Terrax, who is a lame-ass Fantastic Four villain.
How dare you? I like Terrax.
He's got a cool-looking axe. I'll give him that.
He's the Herald of Galactus. It is pretty cool that's who they beat up.
Yeah, and they actually like him a lot better when he comes back and they fight him later on.
Yeah, that is. I want to get to that arc.
Yeah,
in my reading and reread it because I remember that cover of Nova and the Thing, and they've got super big '90s
guns
blasters, and Nova's like popping a bubblegum bubble.
Yeah, and Thing is saying, "Here comes Terrax, kid," and Nova says, "Piece of cake, and don't call me kid." Because they were trying to rebrand him. There was this weird attempt to rebrand him as Kid Nova, and everybody was calling him Kid Nova.
Which makes no sense because, comic book timeline. Richard Rider was a junior in high school in 1975, and then in 1991 he's college age.
Right,
but he's the oldest person on the team.
Absolutely, yeah. Because it's him, it's Firestar, it's Namorita. Mm-hmm. We got Marvel Boy, who will later become Justice.
Yeah, and Marvel Boy had shown up, I think, vaguely in this. He's the past self of someone from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, so Guardians of the Galaxy, which we should probably clarify, is the original version of Guardians of the Galaxy. So none of the characters that you've come to know and love from the movie or from the most recent books.
No.
I mean, none of them. These are all a bunch of
Galaxy are almost like Marvel's Legion of Superheroes. They're a future team.
Yeah, they live in the future, and occasionally they time travel back to Earth, and because comics, but
because they need to be relevant.
That's right. But they're all from each one of them is from one of the various planets in the solar system. So Vance Astro is the one from Earth, and he's he's an astronaut who's super old and would crumble to dust if not for his suit that keeps him immortal or something. I don't know.
And
I used to read this.
He wears an outfit a lot like Marvel Boy's costume here, and it looks his is way cooler because it's it's like a Spider-Man suit. It's top to bottom. And it's got his face in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Vance Astro. Yeah, Vance Astro is the alternate future version of this character who is Vance Astrovic. And so he's a kid who tries to join the Avengers and doesn't make it. He's telekinetic.
Yeah.
And he's kind of the even though he's young, he's kind of the smartest, most cool-headed dude on the team. Yeah, and his powers aren't that strong. He can do a few things, but he gets nosebleeds a lot.
He's a little bit like early Jean Grey. He's got telekinesis, but he can only push himself so much. He always gets nosebleeds, and and he is passing out because he tries to do too much.
And he has a glorious cape. I want to point out at the beginning, his cape is just I guess even Justice has a glorious cape too.
Yeah.
But he has always been rocking that cape, man. Been doing that since the original days.
And I think the thing I identified most, because at various points reading this growing up, because I reread them all the time, basically every male character was my favorite at one point in my childhood.
Sure.
And, I think my point of identification for Justice is he falls for Firestar, who is a hot redhead.
Yep.
And their relationship is really sweet. It's kind of chaste.
It's very chaste.
It's very holding hands sort of thing.
there's one thing. His big thing, which we can get to, is that he gets hauled off to jail at one point because he kills his dad.
He does
accidentally with his. Yeah, his dad was abusive and beat the fuck out of him, and he retaliates with his telekinetic powers and accidentally kills the guy.
Yeah.
But he ends up going to jail for it in one of the most potent arcs, which is actually happening at the same time as the Housekeeper is turning evil. That's why you don't see Marvel Boy or Firestar going up against the Housekeeper.
Yeah, that's
because they're involved in the trial.
Mm-hmm.
And which I believe Foggy Nelson is his lawyer.
Nice.
But
although comic book Foggy is much less consistently amazing than TV show Foggy.
I mean, we can't all live up to TV show Foggy, man. That guy's great.
I love TV show Foggy.
Me too. He's wonderful. But there's like at one point after he gets after he's found guilty, not of first-degree murder. They clear him of first-degree murder, but I think they charge him. They find him guilty of negligent homicide.
Yeah.
And the Warriors try to break him out as the van is going into the vault, and he has to like calm them all down and be like, "Whoa, guys, I have to do my time now."
That's a great issue. Like
it really is.
Justice is a little bit too goody-goody to be like quite as entertaining as some of the other members, but because he's on this team of like some extreme 90s dudes, like because he has Nova and Night Thrasher to bounce off of, he's a much better addition to the team.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting to, is that before they go to the vault, after the fight with the Shield guys or the Vault guys is over, before he gets back in the van, he takes Firestar off in like the woods to have a private conversation with her, and she basically says, "So can we have sex before you go?"
I don't remember that. I probably missed that as a kid.
And he's like, "No, our first time is going to be special. It's going to be on the day that we're married." And they kiss passionately. And it's like, oh, God.
Oh, brother. Come on, Justice.
Right?
Give her something to wait for. Although, maybe he's like, look, it's going to be my first time. I don't want to be the last thing that she remembers is that I'm really bad in bed. Because Firestar was a member of the Hellions, and those kids strike me as being very sexually active.
Was she a member of the Hellions? Or was she just trained at Massachusetts Academy? I guess she was a member of the Hellions.
She was sort of a member. Like, she hung around. She was in that class. I don't know that she ever wore those terrible purple and pink costumes.
Because they fight the Hellions like a lot, especially at the beginning. Because there's, I think it's like issue 10 when the White Queen comes after Firestar again. Mm-hmm. And they all... The most annoying thing about early New Warriors is that they keep doing the thing that you do in the 90s, which is you have the two teams fight, and they all fucking pair off. Yeah. And it happens every goddamn time.
Hold on, I'm looking for the cover. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Remember Psionics, Miles? Remember everyone's favorite supervillain team?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's them. I love them, actually. Psionics was a brand new villain team.
Yeah.
And
they have not showed up since.
So, no. But they should, because Mathematic is the fucking best.
Mathematic, whose superpower is math, is pretty awesome. And then also, like, I was 12 when I was rereading these comics last, and one of them is a hooker because it's the 90s and the code will allow you to do that.
Her code name is for real. Her code name is Pretty Persuasions.
Yep.
That is her code name. She has a psionic whip.
She wears a lot of fishnets. And,
there she is.
Yeah. It's and I like how in this issue, I don't remember this issue that well. Actually, I guess I do. I remember it fairly well. But I remember the guy who's like introducing the team, who's like this kind of milquetoast accountant who works for
the
like
old
this
guy, right?
No, not him. His assistant, who's kind of like this assistant. And every time he has to talk about Pretty Persuasions, he acts vaguely embarrassed. He's like,
right.
And this is because they made these supervillains, and he's just kind of like, and this is Pretty Persuasions. Her powers are, sex basically. I don't know.
She can act on the pleasurable impulses of the human psyche. But there's an episode later because psionics. When I was a kid, I thought I heard of this psionics because I heard everything is cooler in the 90s.
Everyone did,
right? But they come back like a number of times, and there's this one great issue because they attempt to be heroes at one point, and
well, they helped them fight Terrax the second time, right?
Yeah. But at one point, so there's a big crossover story later on, and I don't know if you ever read this, where this guy in like an insane asylum taps into his latent mutant ability to access the Dark Force dimension, and and floods New York City in Dark Force basically because he can't control it. And like, so some people, the people who have like troubled pasts, your Namoritas and Rage, who's a character who comes in later, and all these folks, it can possess certain people and like make them fight their friends. And this story involves Spider-Man, it involves the Fantastic Four, some of the Inhumans, some of the Avengers. Like, it was a big crossover. And after it's over, they kind of like, they kind of help the guy achieve redemption and see the error of his ways, and he becomes the new Asylum. So he starts leading Psionex as the new Asylum character. And when they're trying to be heroes, he accidentally kills a kid. And Math Manic is so traumatized by this that he uses his powers to make it like eternally the day before. And everybody, it's such a weird single-issue story.
Is that time and time again, or is that a different event?
No, that's a whole different thing. It's a single-issue story.
Okay.
It's where, and it's and the New Warriors are going like, like Justice is going like, Firestar, what day is it? And she says, he lays out the paper. We have had 7 straight papers with the same date. Why aren't any of you getting this? It's a really interesting and like kind of almost poignant story about Math Manic trying to deal with that.
That sounds surprisingly deep for like a later New Warriors issue.
Well, that's the thing.
I'm guessing that's like after the first 25, which is really what I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so I'm trying to see when Niciesa left. We should probably talk about Speedball for a second, though, because we haven't mentioned him yet.
We haven't talked about everyone. Is Speedball all we have left of the original members?
There were 6. So it was Thrasher, Nova, Namorita.
We barely talked about Firestar, but the thing is, she had barely been really fleshed out. She was in a couple of New Mutants and X-Men arcs.
Mm-hmm.
In the original cartoon that she debuted in, she's very much kind of like the girl character that they invented to be on that team. Like she's not very fleshed out, but in that they gave her this really sad story. There's a lot of really sad Firestar stories. Like, bad things always happen to Firestar. Like, as a kid, like, she got recruited by Emma Frost, who was like constantly gaslighting her, and she was being like manipulated by one of the Hellions, which the Hellions are the students of the White Queen when she was a supervillain. And so they're like these shitty versions of teenage X-Men. Like, they're assholes. They're all assholes, except for some of them who aren't. But
they're mostly assholes. They're way more interesting than the New Mutants, though. Aren't they? Like, I remember them being interesting in the New Mutants.
Oh yeah. No, they are interesting. I thought you said they were more interesting than the New Mutants.
No, they're more interesting in the New Mutants than they are anywhere else.
Yeah. No, they're a very interesting team because they're like their rival school, basically. But she's always being manipulated by the shittiest Hellion, who is Empath, whose whole deal is he can fuck with your emotions, which is a terrible power, and he is a terrible person. And really, like, she joins the team after having quit Emma Frost's school. And, in this series, she's able to be, to have a boyfriend and be happy until later on when she gets cancer from her powers, because she has fire-based powers.
Okay, so real quick, the issue that I was just talking about with Math Manic is actually Niciesa's last issue on the series. So he wrote the first 53.
Wow, okay.
And there are 75 issues in the original run. And after that, Evan Skolnick took over. And I really loved Evan Skolnick's run. But it started out, I didn't even really register when the creative team switched for whatever reason.
Probably because you were a teenager?
Yeah, probably. Well, because the thing is I actually wrote Skolnick a letter when I was a teenager.
Oh, really?
When they, No, it wasn't, because it wasn't actually while he was writing that book, or indeed any book. When Volume 2 of the New Warriors came out, and I was super excited.
When was this? Was this the Reality Star version?
No, this was a really brief 10-issue run that started in '99, actually, and it went for I think 10 or 11 issues.
Okay.
And it was between the original run and the reality show era, which was Volume 3.
Okay.
So and I was super excited that the New Warriors coming back. Mm-hmm. And then I started reading the issues and getting them every month, and I fucking hated it. And it was just awful. And I felt like all the character development had been lost, and they were just fucking up all these characters. And here I am. I'm 14 years old in '99, and I'm like, this is my first real experience with something in comics that I love being taken over by somebody else and just destroyed.
Which is something, as a comics fan, that you learn to live with, or you learn to stop reading comics.
Right. So I wrote a letter to Evan Skolnick, who did the last, I think 22 issues of the run, and who I really loved as a writer. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I was like, hey, because I read all the letters pages, right? This is a forum for me to vent my shit, and I wanted to write to the old writer. So I wrote him a letter, and I said, hey, this is what I think. I have a real problem with a lot of this. What do you have an opinion? And he actually wrote back to me, and he was very nice, and he was like, thanks for your letter. I don't really know what to tell you. I haven't written for Marvel, or indeed in comics in general, in some time. So he was out of the business.
Yeah.
When I wrote to him, but he told me he forwarded my letter on to Tom DeFalco, who I'm sure ignored the fuck out of it. But he was a really nice guy writing back to me like that. But
yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, isn't it? You
didn't even have to do that. Has he done any work since?
He is. So I have looked him up. He has not done any comics work. Let's see. God, where is it? I have it right here. Because it's really weird. He has gone on to work in video games.
Nice.
So he was let's see. When he was at Marvel, I'm just reading this off his Wikipedia page. When he was at Marvel, he was the managing editor of the Double Dragon limited series. And so since then, he has worked. He's lectured about writing for video games. He was hired as the lead narrative designer for LucasArts in 2011.
Nice. Oh, right before they went under.
Yeah, exactly. So he's really. I think his main thing is that as soon as he left comics, he started working for website development and CD-ROM games and shit. Oh, he worked for Cyber Action. That's what he did.
Okay.
So
with that company,
I wouldn't. I'm not either, but I've heard of it. But anyway, he went to video games mainly. Is what happened to him.
No, I have a story. Oh, go ahead. Finish.
No.
Oh, I was just gonna say I did something similar in probably my mid-20s. I looked up. Did you ever play any of the old Star Wars games from the 90s with the live-action cutscenes?
Does Dark Forces count?
Yeah, Dark Forces.
Okay. Yeah.
I looked up the actor who played the main character in that game.
Al Katarn.
Yeah, and the actor has quit acting. And he runs a wine vineyard in Napa Valley. And I was like, that's the most awesome thing I've ever heard. And it was so expensive to actually import a bottle of wine from his vineyard, but I kind of want to do it because that guy was my hero.
Just to show him some support. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it was just the most baffling thing. And I found all these pictures of him. He's got long hair, but he's still got the beard. And I was like, good for you, Kyle Katarn.
Yeah. But anyway, Skolnick starts off his run with issue 54 with this insanely dark story where they go to Africa to start saving refugees who are being killed by a militia.
Jesus.
And it turns out that there's a supervillain group behind it, naturally. A brand new group called, I believe they were called the Undertow. So they operate out of a submarine. And their main guy is I don't even know how to describe him. He's this big monster-looking dude he's huge, he's bald, he has enormous teeth. I'm trying to remember his name.
He sounds like Baraka.
He kind of looks like Baraka, but all like kind of muscly / flabby. It's kind of weird, and he's got all these spikes coming down from his wrists and on his ankles too. But he's like this tactical genius. And the actual member, he's like the leader, but he's also, of course, the boss. So when you fight him, you're going to get fucked up. But the actual team consists of 3 pairs, and I believe it was right and wrong, dark and light, and cut and dry.
Yeah, those are some 90s ass super.
They all sound exactly how you like. So cut has swords and knives, and like dry dries you out. And, you know,
he drinks very crisp champagne.
Fucks up Namorita at the time.
Yeah, Namorita is in a lot of ways. Namorita and Nova are kind of like the Worf of New Warriors, in that they're the big tough guys who always like charge like the bad guy and then just get their shit handed to them, so you can see how bad the bad guy they're fighting is.
See, that's like, as much as, you know, Justice and Firestar are a fun couple, Namorita and Nova were for me the comic book couple.
Oh yeah,
like I loved their relationship,
especially when and brash and much more, much less level-headed. Like they'll fly off the handle and stuff. They're much more, you know, not bubbly. I don't know words.
I keep going back to this kind of concept, and it's the fact that New Warriors consistently did darker stories than you would expect the medium to tackle. The storyline where Namorita left the team, and then when she came back, she had evolved. Like she had done like this blue Atlantean evolution. She was blue and shit. She started calling herself Chimera. That storyline involved her getting drunk, sleeping with a dude who, as it turned out, was like sleeping with a dude she never met, who, as it turned out, had a vendetta against. It was either Night Thrasher or Rage or both of them. I think it was Night Thrasher, and that dude stole her like address book or some shit that had all of the Warriors' secret identities in it. And so,
in fairness, that was a dick move on Namorita's part to do that. You keep that shit in your head, Namorita.
Right. So he learns all their identities. He and his gang, the Poison Memories, is the name of their gang. And I can't believe I remember all this. It's all coming back to me. 90s. But yeah, the Poison Memories. So they kidnap members of each. They kidnap or murder members of each of the Warriors' family. So they kill Rage's grandmother.
I remember the aftermath of that. That was one of the few later issues I had, and Rage was all sad.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and I think they kill, or maybe they try to kill. They almost kill Firestar's dad. They put the Firestar's dad in the hospital. They kidnap Nova's brother and cut off his finger.
Jesus.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Yeah, and they so at the end, after they deal with this whole thing and you know win, and as much as you can win in that scenario, Namorita like leaves. But what I keep coming back to about this is that these are all like very consistently dark stories that, or at least stories that tackle more adult themes than you would expect from this kind of book, which I think is one of the reasons that a lot of people didn't buy it. Probably.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that a lot of people miss out on, because we were talking about the first issue, mm-hmm. and when Captain America shows up at the end of their first adventure and is like, all right, kids, that's cool, but the Avengers can handle Terrax now. And Night Thrasher's whole reason for starting the team is, dude, fuck the Avengers. They're dealing with their high and mighty space demons, and they don't give a shit about regular crime on the streets, which is what we're going to deal with.
Right.
Now, you know, granted, the New Warriors, some of their most memorable storylines, like time and time again, involve them, you know, fighting the Sphinx and time traveling and doing all this crazy shit.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like they go into wars. They deal with gang violence. They deal with abuse. They deal with like just all this really interesting shit. I mean, fucking in that first Skolnick story, when they fight the Undertow, like Chimera and Amarita gets kidnapped and brainwashed, and she remains kidnapped and brainwashed until like the end of the series.
Wow.
When they finally rescue her.
Huh.
She is forced to be, because it turns out that all these guys, Cut and Dry and Dark and Light and all them, are all like activists or people who wanted to change the world, who these guys have kidnapped and brainwashed with mental comic stuff and forced to join their group.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. It's just like you're never gonna see a new Warriors movie, or at least you're never gonna see one done right. And you're never going to see.
Thinking that reading that first issue, it's like the New Warriors definitely will not make it to the MCU, but they totally should.
They should, but they won't because everything that they are has been fucking tainted by the bullshit Civil War crap.
Yeah,
and
I don't even think it's because of that. I think it's just because they're like not a recognizable name.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably also true.
And they just haven't been part of, like, even Guardians, which kind of came out of nowhere. Like, they're based on the Guardians team, the series from, like, 2008 that was kind of popular. New Warriors, like, this first volume, the 90s shit, is, like, the high water mark.
But then again, I mean, when you think about it, Iron Man wasn't exactly popular.
Yeah, but Iron Man has a much bigger, like, history and like a much bigger like continuing fan base. Like he's a Stan Lee original. Jack Lee. What's that?
Alan Kingsley joined. Sorry. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Alan. Good to see you. If I need to have every unspoiled co-host on here eventually.
That's right. Apparently, yeah.
Except for Brendan, who won't return my calls. But
I'm not touching that. I'm not going there.
Is this the part of the show where I look like a giant dick? But yeah, I mean, they're very separate from the Avengers. They operate in a certain way, like team dynamics wise, but they're on a different. They're on kind of a lower level, a more street level. And I think I read this first issue, and this is kind of my benchmark for what a first issue of a team book should be. Like it should introduce all the characters. You should know that they had other stuff going on, but you don't have to address all of it. And they should fight a threat and overcome that threat in the first issue. You know, you can. Yeah. There are pros and cons to the deconstruction of today and like the Claremont era of like Bronze Age comics when like a million things would happen in one issue and nothing feels like it's fleshed out. But I really hate deconstruction on the first issue of a team book. Like when it feels like nothing's been accomplished. Like all you do is like see each character for a minute and they don't even meet yet. Like that is a great first issue. Like they come together, they fight a threat that is like above their weight class a little bit, but they
the relationships are immediately established.
Hey, not easier.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah. I like the relationships our only viewers right now are unspoiled co-hosts.
Welcome to the club, guys. This is all one big clubhouse that we invite everybody to join. But yeah, the relationships are all established. Like, fucking the stuff that Nova and Namorita say to each other in the first issue, where he says he uses a line. Well, there's that.
You're talking about when he says his catchphrase from the 70s.
When he says his old catchphrase, he says, "Blue blazes," and she's like, "Blue blazes?" And he says, "Sorry, old habit." And then later on, she says, "Suffering shad,"
which I don't even know if that was an existing catchphrase of her, because I don't know how much play she got in like the Namor series that she originated from.
I don't know either, but he looks at her and he says, "Suffering shad." She says, "Sorry, old habit." And for the rest of the book, that's like their little lovey-dovey words to each other. Like right before they kiss, they'll say "blue blazes" and "suffering shad."
That's pretty.
And adorable. It's like it's so great. And then, okay, can we talk about Speedball now?
We have to. Okay, so earlier on, I said
because
that
I started to go into what I hate about the Civil War stuff, and that begins and ends with Speedball.
Yep, it sure does. Speedball, earlier I said that Marvel tries every 10 years to recreate Spider-Man. And with Speedball, this was in the 80s, and they literally got freaking Steve Ditko to, do a solo series about a solo character, and it was Speedball.
Yeah.
I don't know if he wrote it, but he did the art, and I have some of those issues, and they are very good.
I read them. That I was actually one of the only characters from the Warriors that I was familiar with before picking up the Warriors, and that was another reason I picked up that issue, is because I recognized Speedball. Mm-hmm. I had some of those old issues where he gets stuck in a dimensional field along with his fucking cat, or something.
He's got a cat who has the same superpowers as him.
Actually, no, it's not his cat. It's the doctor's cat.
Is that
who's working on the lab? Yeah,
he ends up taking care of the cat. It becomes his cat.
What is the cat's name? Oh god, this is gonna bother me.
Oh, I want to say Streaky, but that's a different superpower.
No,
cat.
It's Niles.
Niles.
It's Niles the cat.
That's perfect.
And God, I love New Warriors. Anyway, he's he is this 15-year-old kid who is cheerful and makes jokes, and everybody likes him, except when he's annoying the fuck out of them.
He's very early Spider-Man-esque, especially in that solo series. He doesn't have the pathos, he didn't get his uncle killed.
Right. And his superpower is that he bounces.
Yeah, he has a kinetic field, which makes it impossible to hurt him through regular physical means. And he has all the superpowers of a bouncy ball. He has a great superpower. For some reason, whenever he activates it, he gets a weird costume. I don't really know how that works.
He actually changes it intentionally later on. He figures out he can use the field to change his own costume just because they really wanted to somehow give him a new look. And he started wearing a trench coat for a while, too.
I remember that trench coat. God damn. Everyone in the 90s had to wear fucking coats. Actually, I don't mind a lot of, X-Men costume with coats. I actually kind of like coats on costumes. Especially, your rogues and even, when the Avengers had them. But Speedball in a coat looks awful.
Right.
Because he looks homeless.
And he loves to activate his powers by jumping in front of trains and shit. Yeah. There's actually a great you remember how in the old, I don't know if they still do this or not, but you remember how in the old annual big issues they would have the main annual story and then a bunch of little ass stories in the back? So in the first New Warriors annual, there's a brief Speedball story where they're trying to get more information on his powers, so they inject him with something that might be able to analyze him from the inside out. And he's like, all right, well, sweet, that's cool. I'm gonna go be Speedball now. And so he's like, okay, should I go? So he jumps out the window because nothing can hurt him when he's in his kinetic form. And as soon as he hits the ground, it activates before he can die. So he just jumps out the window, and he gets saved by Spider-Man. And then. And he's like, all right, God damn it. And then later he tries to jump in front of the truck and he gets saved by the Beast. And
I have to look up this story now.
And then later it's She-Hulk. He's trying to do something on the construction site and She-Hulk saves him. And I think the last straw is the little kid, the little girl from Power Pack saves him from activating his powers.
little 5-year-old Katie Power.
Yeah, and he storms back into New Warriors headquarters going, do you know how many superheroes there are in this stupid city?
All of them, as it turns out.
It's so good.
There's Alpha Flight in Canada, and that's it.
Yeah, and he was another one that actually got way more character development than you would expect, especially when they start playing with what his powers actually do. So we mentioned the Time and Time Again storyline, which is the one where...
Yeah, that is the one where Nova's nemesis from the 70s, who is basically Apocalypse before Apocalypse was Apocalypse.
Essentially, yes.
He is OG Apocalypse. He's original Apocalypse.
That's right.
He has basically the same powers. He's nebulously super powerful and kind of magical.
Mm-hmm. He shoots energy blasts and does various things.
Yeah. And the setup to this Days of Future Past weird alternate reality, actually, in a lot of ways, it's more like Age of Apocalypse, because reality is overwritten to where Sphinx is the almighty ruler of this land.
Yeah.
Everything is very vaguely Egyptian, It
actually reminds me of the Secret Wars, the recent Secret Wars in a lot of ways.
Oh, that
where
too.
reality is rewritten with Doom as the Emperor, and of course he's fucking married to Sue Richards.
Did you know that there was a Secret Wars tie-in that featured this timeline?
The Time and Time Again story?
Yeah.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, Jay and Miles talked about it when they were like recapping all of the X-Men tie-ins, and apparently it was like an X-Men story, or some of the X-Men were involved in it vaguely. I need to look that up because I'm pretty sure it's this timeline that was in it, and I was shocked anyone remembered it other than you, me, and are you familiar with Adam Warrock? He's like a nerdcore rapper.
No.
He did a New Warriors EP.
Oh, I have to listen to that.
Yeah, you
I must listen to this.
It's not one of his. It's not some of his best work. It's one of the ones that he like kind of ironed out on a weekend, but it's fun.
Right on.
He did one for that, and he did one for '90s X Factor.
Yeah. Anyway, so he. I gotta check that out though. Sphinx, in order for the New Warriors, because his whole thing is, Sphinx and Nova are the Batman and Joker of C-list Marvel characters.
Yeah.
And so, they're destined to do this forever. And so he sends he like scatters the warriors throughout time. And
that was this time and time again? I'm going to keep
this. Is time and time again. This is time and time again.
For reference, I had the third issue of this, which is the final issue. And it was one of those prestige format 90s issues where like all the new warriors are trapped in an hourglass. The big
hourglass.
And the sand was glow in the dark. And
yeah.
I tried to make heads or tails of that last issue so many times as a kid, and because the oldest kid from Power Pack was in it, which was another favorite of mine as a kid.
Well, yeah, because this is the story where they bring in all the new ones. Right. you had Speedball, and then later Silhouette joined, who was another new character who was Night Thrasher's girlfriend, who had Dark Force powers that allowed her to basically teleport.
She had a disability, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, she was a handicapped superhero.
Mm-hmm. She could phase. She's kind of like Kitty Pryde, but she could only phase into darkness.
Right. She didn't like phase through things. She phased like it was a form of teleportation that she had to like meld into shadows, and then she'd come out of another shadow, kind of deal.
And she would often be naked.
Yeah, because originally her clothes didn't come with her.
I was 10 years old. I thought it was cool.
I'm sorry. I'm just pretty sweet.
I feel like we both read these comics at very formative ages. But yeah, she was a cool character. She could like kick ass with those crutches. Like she had crutches, and she would use them to beat the shit out of people.
And they had like electrical charges in them, and like a spike with poison and shit like that.
Yeah.
That's she does that to the evil housekeeper. Actually, she hits her with.
She takes the evil housekeeper out, right?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, because
Night Thrasher.
Although Night Thrasher kills her.
Does he?
Night Thrasher's the one who kills her with his fucking Uzi.
He kills her with an Uzi.
He totally does.
I did not remember that.
Yeah, he's got a thing on his back that has an Uzi in it. But that's revealed in the Punisher story, actually, that he's got the Uzi in there. But anyway, so they have Silhouette.
Is it an Uzi or is it a Mac-10?
No, it's an Uzi.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's an Uzi. I mean, I'm not up on my gun knowledge, so it looks like an Uzi to me.
Okay.
But. And then you had Rage, who comes in at some point, too.
I can talk about Rage.
Yeah.
Rage would have eventually been a Underdog Redemption character, which this is going to be the new segment in which I try to sell Maggie on a terrible character.
Okay. Rage is not a terrible character.
Rage got his due, but he was brought into the Avengers, I think kind of editorially mandated. They were like, okay, we have very few black characters in the Avengers. Why don't you put one in there? And they kind of put this character together. He has a very bad outfit. It's very late 80s, early 90s.
Well, are you talking about the original one or the one that he gets later?
I'm talking about...
like the hockey mask.
No, I'm talking about the Luchador mask.
Okay, no. Luchador.
Which you actually may be very fond of that costume.
I'm actually way more fond of his later one, because actually during the Poison Memory storyline after his grandmother dies, that's when he puts on the fucking badass. Like, he's got like a hockey mask and like spiked shoulder blades and chains around his wrists. It's so good. But he's like he's a 14-year-old kid or maybe a 13-year-old kid trapped in the body of a big ass muscular adult.
Because he's a mutant, right?
think so. Maybe. I don't remember, to be honest.
How a lot of these characters have their powers is kind of nebulous.
Yeah. But it was really, those were the original 8 for a long time. I mean, there were the original 6 in the first issue, and then Silhouette and Rage were kind of, the core group.
And Darkhawk would occasionally guest star. Or did he only guest star in that one story?
Darkhawk was only for a while in the one story about Namorita getting not at all raped, at all.
He was also in Nothing But the Truth.
Which one was that?
Nothing But the Truth is the one where it's revealed that we've been alluding to this storyline, but that's the one where Night Thrasher, who is Batman Punisher, his Alfred is a somewhat problematic old Asian lady stereotype that's his housekeeper. It's basically, think of what if Alfred betrayed Batman and revealed himself to be a wizard. Actually, she reminds me of Lo Pan from fucking Big Trouble in Little China.
Right. Well, because he has Ty. Her name is Ty, by the way, in case you were wondering. That's her name. And she's the housekeeper. And then he has Cord, who's like his trainer, who's kind of like his
also
his Ted Grant? I don't know.
Yeah, he's kind of like Wildcat.
Yeah. But so it turns out when you do eventually find out what happened with Night Thrasher's parents, which is that Ty made Cord kill them because when his dad was in the Vietnam War, he and a bunch of other dudes made this pact with these Vietnamese sorceresses, and it's all pretty fucking insane.
It's very Identity Crisis, right?
But oh God, no! Don't say that.
Okay, that's a little. That's
a low blow.
It's a weird retcon-y thing. Which I was not sure about. But anyway, I don't want to reread that story because I don't know how I feel about it.
So I do know that Darkhawk showed up again in the Time and Time Again storyline because that was when they were introducing the new team of warriors, because it was Darkhawk, Turbo, who had been introduced a few a number of times. She'd come in a number of times. It was Turbo was of course you
say of course. I have no idea what Turbo's deal is.
Okay. All right.
She has helicopters on her wrists, right?
Basically, she got turbines on her wrists and on her ankles, which she can use to fly and also blow gusts of wind at people, and also punch people really hard. It calls it a hyper punch, I think, is what they called it.
Not a turbo punch.
If you blow, because the wind blows I'm assuming it's because the wind blows the other direction, which makes the fist go faster. Anyway, the interesting thing about her for a while was that Turbo was actually two people. There was a male and a female version. They were friends, and they traded off. But the woman, Miki Musashi, the lady, was actually way better with the suit. So eventually she took over full time.
Yeah. Nice.
So it was Darkhawk, who I last saw make an appearance in Avengers Arena, and it was glorious because
no spoilers because that is on Maggie's list of.
I won't say anything about it other than the fact that that at one point, because Avengers Arena is all about teen superheroes being put in this situation, and somebody's like, "So aren't you 30 or something?" and he goes,
"Yeah."
He goes, "Yeah, I guess once a teen superhero, always a team superhero." Because he never went anywhere. Darkhawk, Turbo, Alex Power, who stole all of his siblings' powers and had all of them.
Which is a dick move on his part.
Which they kept calling him out over.
Yeah, and they called him Power Packs.
You're right.
But which I thought was very cool when I was 10.
They eventually changed his name to Powerhouse, which is much cooler. And then, who was the other? Oh, it was Dagger from Cloak and Dagger.
Oh, weird. Not Cloak, it was Cloak.
No, Cloak can fuck off. I don't know. He
was huddling and crying in a corner because that's how his powers work.
They did some bullshit explanation where she was like, "I need an outlet for myself where I don't have to hang out with you all the time."
I think that's fair.
Totally. I mean, it was
a
weird.
Cloak got to be an Infinity Gauntlet. He got a really cool panel or two in Infinity Gauntlet. So yeah. I think it's fair that Dagger gets her own thing.
Turbo and Powerhouse actually ended up being permanent members of the team later on. Darkhawk and Dagger were dropped. And then, of course, the The other character, who I believe was introduced around this time, maybe not quite yet, was well, I'll get to Hindsight Lad later on. Let's just put it that way.
I was going to ask.
But the point is that during Time and Time Again is when Dagger, Darkhawk, Turbo, and Power Packs all join the team, right? Because they have to go rescue the original Warriors.
I remember just the last line of that issue being, "What the heck are we going to do with 37 new Warriors?"
I think it was 13, but yeah.
Which was later ripped off at the end of the first arc of the Busiek-Perez Avengers run, which is, what the heck are we going to do with 37 Avengers? Which, quick sidebar,
what you've always done.
One of the most satisfying things in that run of Avengers, which it's my favorite by far, is that Justice and Firestar join the team.
Yeah.
Like, they get to graduate up before being forgotten.
Which I always actually didn't like.
Really?
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Because I was a New Warriors fanboy, I was, when I was starting reading comics, I'm, fuck the Avengers, man. Because the New Warriors attitude was fuck the Avengers. So that was one of the reasons that was actually one of the reasons I never got into the Avengers books. It's because I read New Warriors first and they hated them.
Yeah. I'm usually not crazy about them, but that run is fantastic.
Yeah. But anyway, so during the Time and Time Again story, all the original Warriors get sent into like weird historical places. Like Rage gets to go back in time and experience slavery or something. Like, he's not a slave, but he talks to people who are slaves. He's in Africa, I think, and he finds out that like tribes are selling their own people into slavery. He has to deal with that. And like I forget what Night Thrasher does. Firestar like is in Salem for the witch trials, I think.
Oh god.
But Speedball spends time in the kinetic dimension, which apparently is a thing. That's where he gets sent, and they have to like part of the Time and Time Again story. I don't know if you remember, they have to like recalibrate the machinery or whatever to bring him out.
Because I don't remember anything because it made no sense to me.
The Sphinx gets defeated by the power of love, because obviously,
right? And Mati from Captain Planet shows up.
Dude, basically, it's like, seriously. So the not to get off on another tangent. I mean, that's basically what this whole thing has been. But he's in love with, because we talked earlier about the Days of Future Past ripoff storyline, which involved a female Sphinx, and she had like found his stone or whatever, his Ka stone, and turned into the Sphinx, right? And she was actually a villain for a while. Well, he came back, took the stone from her, and the whole reason she did all of this was because she was in love with him.
Right.
So he takes the stone back from her, becomes the Sphinx again, but they eventually defeat him by her, like saying once again how much she's in love with him, and him finally agreeing to love her in return. And then they join together and become a hermaphroditic version of the Sphinx. Yeah, not making this up. So anyway, they have to rescue Speedball from the kinetic dimension, and once he comes back in ensuing issues, he has way more control over his powers. And he can do things like he can like send the bubbles out from his body to batter shit and do all this weird stuff. And much later on, there's a story called, I believe it's called, God, I want to say it's called Future Shock, but there were like 15 stories in the 90s called Future Shock, so I'm not sure. But it's revealed that that's actually a synthetic copy of Speedball with some kid from the future's brain in him who was running away from his dad, who had been taken over by evil technology and had forgotten and had to go so deep into into hiding that he had to think he was Speedball. So
that's some.
The story ends. It ends in like issue 72, and there's only 75 issues of the original run. It ends in issue 72, and they
So where was Speedball?
He was still in the kinetic dimension. That's the thing, is that the copy dies. The Sphinx actually murders the fuck out of him, and they end up rescuing the real Speedball from the kinetic dimension, where he has been since the issue 50.
Well, that sucks.
It's so weird, but Speedball's great, and
he is the lighthearted kind of fun one. He reminds me a little bit of Booster Gold from JLI. Like he just is kind of always has his own attitude going, and he usually doesn't get dragged down into everyone else's angst.
Yeah.
You and Booster Gold, Owen. Yeah, we're not allowed to talk too much about Booster Gold because that's going to be what I explained to Maggie first. This is my
fair enough.
Booster Gold, the character that you.
My main knowledge about Booster Gold is that one episode of JLU.
Which is a great episode of JLU.
Oh, it's a fantastic episode. I love the hell out of it.
Also, that's why I love Booster Gold.
I also know that he got punched into space that one time.
That was at the Death of Superman arc. Is your main point of reference for Martian Manhunter fucking Bloodwind?
I don't know what that is, so no.
Do you remember Do you remember Death of Superman? Do you remember Bloodwind? The guy in the
Bloodwind.
Yeah, he's in that version of the Justice League, and he's like, "I'm Bloodwind. I'm real mysterious." And then you're like, "The fuck is this guy?" Then you look him up on Wikipedia, and it's like, "Oh, it was Martian Manhunter in disguise."
I must have blocked it out.
Kind of like the time that Speedball was actually a teen from the future who ran away from home, and whose only refuge from himself was pretending to be Speedball.
Yeah. Oh god, it's actually a really, really pretty great storyline because, they all think he's dead, and it's really fucked up. And it's great because the story actually begins with them all playing Risk together, which is something that I really love. Like
that sounds awesome.
It's like when they do that in Runaways too. Runaways actually I feel like takes a lot from New Warriors because you were talking about you were talking about the first issue of New Warriors being a perfect team book, and I agree with you. But I think that the run of like that first storyline in Runaways is just perfection, and I think it takes what they were doing with New Warriors to its logical conclusion. Yes,
Runaways is confirming that Runaways is brilliant.
Runaways is fucking brilliant. So was it? Oh, they play Risk in Runaways too, and with the alien with Zavin, and Molly wins. Pretty sure Molly wins.
The problem with Runaways is, from what I understand, eventually the original creator left. And
Brian K. Vaughan left,
Yeah, and then a lot of not-so-good stories got done with them, and they got canceled.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, read the Brian K. Vaughan stuff, and then right after that is the 6-issue run that Joss Whedon did, which is really good, except it should have been longer than 6 issues, and he didn't get a chance to actually do what he wanted to do with it. But after that, man, it's like how there's no season, like there aren't any seasons of Heroes after the first one. There just aren't. I don't care what anyone says.
There aren't.
Yeah. So there are no issues of Runaways as far as I'm concerned after the Joss Whedon run. But what was I saying?
You were talking about Speedball dying and then
playing. Okay, well, I was talking about Speedball dying, but the thing is, Speedball, like, everybody loved him. The thing about Speedball dying is that everybody is super broken up. And one thing that I liked about the only thing that I liked about the second volume of New Warriors is they make it very clear that Speedball is like the heart and soul of that team, right?
Yeah, because he totally was, even in the first volume.
So
he's kind of like, if you watch the Justice League cartoon, which you should, like the animated Justice League, the 2 series that they did, is the best version of the DC universe. Like, yes. I like DC Comics a lot more than you do, but like that really is kind of the best, most picturesque version. He is very much like Flash is in the Justice League cartoon. He's like kind of goofy fuck up, but he's not exactly a fuck up, but he's just like, people don't always give him the respect he deserves, but he's very much the heart and soul of the team. And without that character, without kind of like that moral compass, you miss a lot.
So with that in mind, what happened in Civil War?
Oh man. What can we even say, though? Like, if you've read the comic and you've listened to us gush about how great New Warriors was and how they had all this, like, great character dynamic and, you know, all this character growth and everything.
It's one thing to have the entire Civil War kicked off because what apparently Marvel Creative viewed as a shitty team that nobody cared about was accidentally responsible for killing a bunch of kids because they got fucked up by a supervillain that they weren't ready for because they were doing the stupid reality TV show shit. Night Thrasher dies, Namorita dies, and Speedball very nearly dies. And then...
And this wasn't in the actual series.
I'm having a hard time even saying it. Yeah. So he lives, but the theory is that his powers have been shorted out because they handled everything they could handle by protecting him from that blast. And he feels really, really bad about not actually killing kids because he's not the one that actually killed kids, but whatever. So, and then he starts to find out that his powers are still active, but they only activate when he hurts himself. And he becomes a kind of a tweener superhero / supervillain named Penance, who, yes, S&M Speedball.
S&M. He has this spiky bondage. He looks like fucking Voldo from Soul Calibur.
He fucking does. And he's got the spikes inside his suit.
Yep.
So they can hurt him, so his powers can be activated, and inside his helmet, yeah, absolutely. And so, and he starts calling himself Penance. And for this character of all characters to be made into the single most emo thing I've ever said over and.
How crazy is it that this happened to him in 2005 and not in the 90s? How is he able to run the gauntlet of the entire decade of the 1990s? Because this sounds like something out of a Spawn comic.
He survived the 90s without getting dark and gritty, and then he makes it to the mid-2000s, and they somehow contrive to make him dark and gritty, and it's fucking stupid.
Nova had a ponytail, Justice killed his dad, like, Rage's grandma died. Everyone had this dark 90s shit happen to them.
Firestar was all worried about becoming sterile and getting cancer.
Which happened.
Yeah.
Oh, God, poor Fire. I feel so bad for all these characters, because with the exception of, like, Nova, they all kind of got forgotten and killed off or mistreated.
Nova was fortunate enough to get wrapped up in the big Marvel cosmic universe that started kind of happening around the time of Annihilation, right?
Yeah, right when Civil War was happening. They were doing other interesting stuff in space.
Yeah. But, I mean, when they brought back, they did like a... It wasn't that interesting, Maggie says.
I've always heard good things.
It was kind of interesting. I've read Annihilation. It's fine. It's not
comparing
great,
it to the other Marvel summer event that was happening at the time, which was Civil War. It must have been a giant breath of fresh air.
Right. But yeah, they did they did another New Warriors run. Like they did a volume 4.
Is that the one with Kid Nova, like actual Kid Nova?
No, I don't think so. That's the one with... I don't remember actual Kid Nova. No, that's Volume 5.
Okay. Because right now there's a Nova, but he's not Richard Rider. He's like a kid.
Right. Volume 4 was... Well, it's been canceled again, I'm pretty sure. Because none of these... After the first run went 75 issues, and like nothing else has gone more than 12.
Yeah, nothing else has even touched that.
Yeah, but the fourth incarnation was when all these kids that had been depowered after House of M got together and used a bunch of technology to give themselves superpowers. Like Jubilee was a new warrior in this time period. She was calling her no, pre-Vampire Jubilee, post Power Loss Jubilee. She was calling herself Wondra, and their leader was Night Thrasher, because Night Thrasher turned out was alive, but it was actually his brother who was introduced in the original run of New Warriors, whose name was what was his fucking name?
I don't remember him having a brother.
Yeah, he had a half brother. His name was Daniel, and his fucking code name was, I don't remember, but he had some kind of bioelectricity powers. Anyway, so yeah, he totally had a half-brother. And actually, Silhouette left Night Thrasher for his half-brother.
Oh. Dick move, Silhouette. Where's Silhouette now, anyways?
I don't think she's ever been reintroduced, which is a shame because I loved her.
Yeah, she was cool.
But yeah, he tricks all the New Warriors into thinking he's Night Thrasher, but it turns out he's the half brother. And then they go back in time to try and save everybody, save Night Thrasher, and prevent the Civil War thing from happening. The school from being blown up. And they go into like an alternate future where Night Thrasher is Iron Man and Tony Stark is Night Thrasher. And it's all really pretty dumb. The thing I really think about New Warriors is that they've never been able to recapture what it had before.
Yeah.
And it's so the ending of the original,
like New Mutants in that regard.
Yes.
They're always trying to redo New Mutants, which was like when it was coming out, it was as good as X-Men, if not better at times. And they try and do it every once in a while, and it never fucking works.
Yeah, and like I love X-Force. Don't get me wrong. Like I was a big X-Force guy. New Warriors and X-Force crossed over a lot. They were like friends. But no,
New Mutants became New Warriors. You mean?
New Warriors and X-Force cross over a lot, like 5 times.
I don't like X-Force just because New Mutants. It's what New Mutants kind of morphed into.
They're very different animals. I mean, New Mutants is special. New Mutants is a special thing in its own way. I liked X-Force because I was really into it when I was a kid.
Yeah, if I had been a teen, or younger in the 90s reading comics, I probably would have loved X-Force.
Yeah. But the thing about New Warriors that I loved, I think it's really very well encapsulated in the way the original series ended. Which is the fact that it's kind of all about real issues, and in many ways it's very inspirational to people. It doesn't shy away from what actually happens in the world as much as you would expect comics marketed for kids to do. Mm-hmm. But when it goes there, it's all very much like, every time, like Namorita fucks up, she gets drunk and she sleeps with this guy, and she fucks up, and people get hurt because of it, and she has to leave. You know what I mean? Yeah. But she comes back. To the guy, it's that she has a little black book with everyone's secret idea. Yeah. Well, why do you even need a little black book? You go in the ocean all the time. It's gonna get wet. But she comes back and she is blue and has like webbed fingers and hands, and she goes and finds Rich Rider, Nova, who she had like just started a relationship with before she took off, when she was, beautiful or whatever. And she is really like paranoid that he's going to reject her. And he just like accepts her without even thinking about it. And they all do, and that is kind of very much the New Warriors always call themselves a family, and they have, Night Thrasher gets kicked off the team after Chimera. Yeah. After Namorita gets kidnapped and brainwashed, Chimera gets kidnapped and brainwashed, because Night Thrasher had his own solo series during this time, and so he was kind of off doing his own thing, he and Rage. And so Nova was pissed that Namorita gets kicked off the team, and was like, fuck this guy, he wasn't there for us when we needed him, so
he's got his own solo guys, series, fuck that guy.
Yeah, so hey guys, you want to come with me, or are you going to go stick with him? And everybody goes with Nova except for Rage, who sticks with Night Thrasher. Because, the black guys have to stick together.
That's kind of a bummer. Like, all right, well, no black guys on the team, I guess.
Right. But they go through all this shit. So the final storyline of New Warriors involves old villains from Nova and Rom the Space Knight.
Rom Space Knight.
Yeah. Which are the
Dire Wraiths?
The Dire Wraiths, yes.
Which, for the uninitiated, Rom Space Knight was a comic that Marvel did in the 80s. Like, this toy company from Japan was like, we're going to bring these toys from Japan, just write a crappy comic book about this toy, about this spaceman called Rom. He's a robot. Just write a comic about it. And they did. And the guy who wrote it, who was, what's his name? God damn it. Not Mark Grunwald.
Not sure.
I'm blanking on his name. He created Rocket Raccoon. He bought it with this toy shit. Like he did it consistently. Like he wrote a bunch of other toy tie-in comics. But Rom Space Knight was so popular that it ran for 75 issues. No one bought the shitty toys, but this comic became a fan favorite about this goofy little like Battlestar Galactica robot character.
So the Dire Wraith Queen has made her way to Earth and has found out about Turbo, because it turns out that Turbo's suit, whose origins have always been kind of sketchy, it turns out that suit is a weapon that was used in the war between Rom's crew and the Dire Wraiths. I think it's like, if the Dire Wraith gets inside the suit, it's going to be a big fucking problem, and she does. Like, she actually kills the male Turbo, assumes his form, tricks the female Turbo into giving him back the suit, and then is like, you will all die now. And it turns into this big cosmic storyline involving Xandarians and space and all this shit. And she is building a device that's going to depower everybody on the planet. Okay? And they managed to sabotage it with the help of yet another new team member, Time Slip, who no one has ever heard of, who is an Indian woman from the country, not the epithet for Native Americans, an Indian woman who can basically slow down time for just her, and so can like hit people a bunch of times, you know, stuff like that.
Like X-Men movie Quicksilver.
Yeah, she was a big part of the the Speedball death storyline, because she was like prophesizing that he was going to die. That was like that big deal. Because she could see into the future sometimes too. Anyway, she doesn't matter. But the point is that they managed to like overload the device so that the blast is contained, but all the new warriors are depowered. Now, while all this has been happening, Night Thrasher and Rage, in an attempt to make up with the warriors, have hatched a plan to free Chimera, Namorita, from the Undertow, and they succeed. And so they kind of show up at the last minute to help join the fight, and that's when everybody gets depowered, right? So the Dire Wraith Queen is, you know, making this grandiose speech about how, you foiled my plan to take away everybody's powers, so it just affected you and my shape-shifting abilities, but you're all gonna pay anyway, you know. And I think she goes for a time slip. And Night Thrasher, who has no superpowers, but does have a blade that comes out of his wrist, says, "You forgot one thing. We need superpowers to make a difference," and stabs her in the head.
In the end, the Dire Wraith Queen was felled by the humblest of Earth's creatures. The humble Night Thrasher. The humble bladed gauntlet.
And it ends with them kind of all like being friends again. And it actually ends with Thrasher and Nova shaking hands. And
is this the last storyline, or just towards?
This is the final issue of the original run. It ends with, we humans don't need superpowers to make a difference. Night Thrasher stabs Dire Wraith Queen in the head, and it ends with the same line that the original series or the original issue ends with, which is Night Thrasher saying, "That's it, then, end of discussion." Because at first they're agreeing on the name, I think, the New Warriors, which Speedball gets from a fucking reporter.
Yeah, I read that issue, and I love it when that is how they come with the name. Oh, they were calling us the New Warriors on the news, which is like,
we should just go with that.
They're news reporters in a comic book.
And Night Thrasher is like, "That's it, then, end of discussion, because I don't really care about the name, so let's stop talking about it." And but
that is what it says.
But in this one, they're agreeing to kind of reform the team, and they shake hands, and that's it. Then in a discussion. So it's like, I just really love the New Warriors. they're just all about that kind of. It's so much about the character relationships. I think they really nail those relationships more than a lot of ongoing books do.
And especially in the 90s. Like in the 90s, it was all about big stunts, which is kind of how it is now, with, you know, everything important always has to happen in an event book. Especially in the 90s, like, the X-Men, which had been written by Claremont for years, which was all about character development, really went for a more like extreme vibe, and so the Avengers was following suit on that. So I feel like in the 90s, this really would have been the Marvel team book to buy.
Well, and even the best writers working today, like I love G. Willow Wilson. I think she's phenomenal. But and I really like A-Force. But the character relationships in that book are fucking all over the place. I have no idea who is friends with who and who, you know what I mean? It's like, they're really just kind of random. And it's like, because the focus isn't on how the characters interact. It's on really exterior plot. And that's fine. It's fine to do it that way. Right. But for me, I gravitate much more toward character-driven books. And New Warriors has always been that in its best incarnations. And the fact that this dude, I mean, all credit to Nicieza, because Nicieza was phenomenal, and he
especially he was one of the best Marvel writers in the 90s.
Yes,
which is not
one of the most acclaimed. I mean, Fabian Nicieza gets his due. Yeah. He is one of the paragons of that era. But for Evan Skolnick, who is a nobody who works in video games now, to just really get such a great grasp of who these people are and how much they love each other, and like a lot of weird shit. I mean, they try so many things. Scarlet Spider was a member of New Warriors for a brief period of time, and that,
of course he was,
and that didn't work out. Like
it's not a 90s comic book unless Ben Reilly shows up.
But I love the way they wrote him out, because Skolnick tried to work him in. He wanted to have him, I think, but they took Scarlet Spider away because they were doing other shit with him. He was going to go away pretty quickly.
So many other shit.
But the storyline reason for him leaving the team was that he would not tell them his secret identity. And They were like, dude, this is not cool. Like, you're one of us. That means you're one of us. You trust us.
Which is such a Spider-Man thing. Like, regardless of whether it's Peter Parker or Ben Reilly. Unless we're talking about Civil War, which we've agreed to never do again.
Yeah, Civil War can eat a bag of dicks.
As much as I grew up loving New Warriors, I think that might be my biggest problem with Civil War is the Spider-Man reveal. I want to say it's New Warriors.
You mean him
revealing his secret
unveiling
identity.
His identity? Yeah. Doesn't he he turns on Iron Man, right?
Yeah, he does.
In the end,
he does in a tie-in issue, and they pick up back with it in the middle of it. It's
dude. Honestly, this is going to be a super unpopular opinion, and I'm prepared for that. But do you know what my favorite part of Civil War was?
Was it that part where he tells Maria Hill to get him some coffee?
No, it was Frontline. The one about the journalist.
I've heard Frontline is not bad, with the exception of that terrible part where, which you might not think is terrible because you don't like Captain America that much. The part where
I know what you're talking about.
That part where that reporter is like, "Oh yeah, Captain America. What do you know about America? When was the last time you watched NASCAR? When was the last time you logged on to MySpace? Fuck you, fuck you."
I understand what they were trying to go for with that, because
I do too, but the examples she used were garbage.
No, the examples were awful.
Dated social media and fucking NASCAR are not the cornerstones of American civilization.
Now, if it had been pro wrestling, I would have been totally down with it, but anyway, I love Frontline, and
it's an interesting idea. Like it's very. Natasha's in the chat saying, "I turned the sound off, but I heard Owen screaming fuck you."
Even with the sound off, she could hear you screaming fuck you.
She's in her office, which is right next to mine.
I thought the cat had jumped on his balls.
I do yell fuck you at my cats very often. No, I like the idea of Frontline, because the idea of Frontline was, okay, we're having this major event. How does the news media of the Marvel Universe respond to this? Which it kind of reminds me of Damage Control, which the premise of that series was, okay, what happens after the superheroes wreck New York for the 18th millionth time? Like, these are the construction crews that clean up their mess.
Right.
For the record,
I like that idea too.
I think Damage Control is a better idea than Frontline, but Frontline is an interesting idea.
Yeah, I think there was a weird like side story with like an Atlantean sleeper agent or some shit that was kind of weird too. But I just like the journalist stuff, you know, because that's because I'm a journalism nerd, so of course I like that shit.
I think the problem with that series was that it took everything so seriously. I think you could get a lot of mileage out of that if you kind of had a tongue-in-cheek, like goofy attitude about it. Do you like Astro City at all?
I've never read Astro City. I've heard good things about it.
You should. One of my Watchmen, way before I ever read Watchmen, was Astro City Confession arc, which is about the Astro City kind of Batman analog, the Confessor, who is a Catholic-themed superhero, whose sidekick he calls Altar Boy, which post sex scandals is much less fun. But but it's a pretty solid storyline. But they did an issue that was the two best stories they've ever done. Was one which was called The Nearness of You, which even if you don't like comics, everyone should read. It's basically the story of a man whose wife was retconned. Like, in all of the, you think about your Infinity Gauntlets and your Crises on Infinite Earths, like all of, the focus is always
Cyclops?
What?
Cyclops?
Sort of.
Is it a story about Cyclops?
The idea of it is it's this regular man who, because of some superhero cosmic level event, time was altered, and one of the casualties of that was the woman he was meant to be with.
Oh, interesting.
Because of this big cosmic level fight, her parents met on a Tuesday and not a Wednesday, so she was never born. And it's a very well written, very man on the street view of superheroics, which is what Astro City is all about.
And it was what Frontline tried to be about. Right.
Well, the best story they ever did was they did that, and they did the one that was about this call center, which imagine the call center that works for the JLA. People are just calling in all this shit, and it's just about these operators who have to take all these crazy calls.
That just reminds me of the Runaways again when they first try to call the cops on their parents, and they're like, "Yeah, call the Avengers or something." I think they got some kind of hotline. He's like, "Yeah, no, duh. I've been calling it since I was 6. It's just a recording." Anyway, I gotta get out of here, but
this was fun.
It was fun. Last thing I did want to say is, you were talking about doing the segment where you explain lame-ass characters to Maggie.
Right.
And so I just thought I'd kick it off by doing what I promised to do and talking a little bit about Hindsight Lad.
Underdog Redemption.
So Hindsight Lad was Speedball's neighbor who...
I love him already.
who somehow found out, I believe it was during the story where the Dark Force dude took over all of New York. I think. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it was. And he and Speedball were kind of not friends, because he just came up to him in school and annoyed the shit out of him. But anyway, Carlton is this kid's name. Poor bastard. And Carlton discovers because the earthquake wrecks their apartment. I don't even remember it. Carlton discovers that Robbie Baldwin is Speedball. Okay. And uses that knowledge to blackmail him into getting onto the New Warriors team. And he shows up in a costume, which if you've not seen it, I would advise you Google image search Hindsight Lad.
Hold on, I'm going to see if I can share my screen. But continue talking.
So
I pulled up a picture. I'm going to see if I can share it.
He's got your typical superhero underwear on the outside. He's a pudgy little bastard, and he's got this motorcycle helmet with rear view mirrors on it. And he just looks like the nerdiest, dorkiest loser excuse for a superhero ever. And when they ask him what he can bring to the team exactly, he says, because he's a really smart kid, he's like, I am a strategic and tactical genius, and I can give you my advice and advise you in strategy. And they're like, all right, but you can't come on missions because, you don't have any powers.
or abilities.
So, right. So when exactly would you be giving us all this information? And he's like, well, after the fact, of course.
This is what you should have done. Is that all he ever does? Does he never get superpowers?
He never, to my knowledge, he never gets superpowers. Now, okay, so later he drops the lad and gets a much less dorky costume and becomes just Hindsight. And he's kind of the strategic. He during the Time and Time Again storyline, he's actually the one who, I believe, who organizes.
That was my first and only time I ever saw Hindsight Lad, was in that one issue I had. I was like, who the fuck is this guy?
I actually think it might have been during Time and Time Again that he found out that Robbie was Speedball, and then during the storyline where they go to Africa, he's the one who like successfully organizes all the new warriors to go find them, and they're all like super annoyed with him, but he's really like trying to help, and he actually manages to be useful in terms of like they find the bad guys they find the Undertow by like decoding one of their radio signals or something like that, which he helps a lot with. Anyway, he eventually becomes kind of like their dude back at base who helps with their communications and like gets shit done for them and kind of like that. And then later he is the guy who starts up the allwarriorsmustdie.com or something.
I was just reading that on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Like after the New Warriors get all those kids killed, he sets up a website that is a hate site for the New Warriors that posts all of their secret identities and encourages people to go kill them, which is terrible.
So, yeah, he's kind of the worst character in the world. There was really no reason for him to ever exist.
Miles, you're doing a very bad job at selling me on this character.
But at the same time, I'll tell you this much, though. At the same time, when he did have his moments of, like, semi-heroism, it was kind of cool, you know? He had a few moments over the course of the series. There's one issue in particular where I feel like there's an issue, and I don't remember this issue very well. It's at the very end of the original run, and it was only a one-shot, but I feel like there's an issue where they discover that their base is... Because the New Warriors base is one of the funniest things throughout the issue. It gets bigger and bigger as the series goes on. They keep, like, discovering more levels, and, like, oh shit, it turns out this was actually a place the Avengers used to live. And look, there's a huge sub-basement where we can be a real superhero team.
And a mini bar.
And the culmination of this is, I think, that, like, he opens some door that he doesn't know where it leads deep into, and it turns out it's, like, a Hydra hideout or something. And they've just been hanging out there this whole time. Anyway. I
want to like this character. I was hoping I would like him more, but apparently...
if I had more of the actual issues in front of me... because they really didn't... There's not a whole lot of collected editions of New Warriors. You can get, like, the early stuff, but a lot of the later stuff, they just didn't bother to reprint in trades.
It's because you can find so many of them in dollar bins.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you were telling Maggie to read some of the originals.
Yeah.
And they are not on Marvel Unlimited.
Are they on Comixology?
They might be. I didn't check, but they're not on Marvel Unlimited. There's a couple.
Because if they're on Comixology, they're going to be fucking cheap.
Yeah, that's true. But, not a, like... I feel like a lot of, kids who read comics in the 90s who had good taste likes the New Warriors. One of my favorite comic podcasts, which is long defunct now, is Awesome to Buy Comics. And one of the hosts of that really loved the New Warriors. So I feel like, it's kind of got a cult following amongst, 90s kids who read them, but not something that a lot of people have been anxious to bring back from that era, sadly.
I mean, if you want, good character-driven stories that touch on the darker side of superheroing and really, try to do the more adult, but still for kids, but like, the kind of older teenager thing and take on some of these more adult issues that kids might actually be dealing with. I mean, there's a story where the time and time again thing with Justice is that he actually goes back to his father's childhood and finds out that his father was gay.
Jesus, really?
And got pressured into marrying and having a kid by his parents. Wow. And like in that way, like finds this, and his dad was really abusive too. So like he finds this way to forgive his own father. Like New Warriors deals with some really intense, personal, important themes. And I think that it's one of the original 75 issues, while it is often silly as balls, it also is kind of quietly one of the more issues-driven series of comics, which is I think is the other reason I was drawn to it, is because, you know, in the New Warriors, there were many times where there were no easy answers, where no choice was the right one, and where it wasn't just beat the bad guy, it was, well, shit.
I feel this in a lot of ways, it's not really a spiritual successor, but, you know, if we're talking about how Marvel has always redone Spider-Man, if you look at team books, like it's kind of comparable to New Mutants in that way. Like it's teenage characters, much darker than you'd expect, you know, treated much more seriously than you would expect. And then, you know, in the 2000s, you get Runaways, which I think it's comparable to also. You know, Runaways skews a little younger, but very similar in like being about this new generation of characters and how they come into their own. Very good, you know, character dynamics and interactions. And then if you want something like that from, you know, modern times, I think the current all-new X-Men series is kind of similar to that, in that it's, you know, teenage characters, much darker than you would think, and all about them like learning their place in the world and trying to come to terms with like the legacy of other characters.
Also very issues driven.
Yeah.
So I think that's, you know, it's one of the few places in the 90s where you're going to find conversations about race and sexuality and gender and gang violence and, you know.
Yeah, I did not know that at all, because in the 90s, Marvel was very unwilling to do stuff that tackled gay issues, because they were finally able to do the North Star thing, which North Star had been like kind of hinted at being gay since like the 80s, and they were finally able to do it, but then they kind of backed off of it. And they wanted to do, I think, an AIDS issue with Nomad around the same time, and they were like, "Yeah, we're not going to do that," you know. So that's very impressive. I'm a little hesitant to read those because, you know, being dated as it is, I don't know how well it would, you know, hold up today.
I mean, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts if you ever do manage to check them out. If you can get a hold of them. I mean, it's not the easiest thing in the world.
I have the first 50 issues, maybe. So I might have it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that, the first 50 issues, I believe Vance finding out his dad was gay is in there. Definitely the Warzone stuff when they get involved in a war in sort of little known countries, that's all in there. The gang violence, Namorita sleeping with that dude drunkenly is in there. So yeah, I go back and check it out. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts about it.
Well, I think you need to go very soon. So would you just like to tell everyone where you're from and where other people can find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me, well, first of all, on the Unspoiled Dark Tower podcast, as well as the Unspoiled Game of Thrones podcast, if you're a patron of that wonderful show, which if you're not, you should be. We're actually doing the last episode of that for season 6 next week. Yep. But Dark Tower will continue because we are just finishing the second book, and there are 5 books left to go. So check that out. And then, as you said at the beginning, I'm also a regular co-host and the producer of the Smash Fiction podcast, which you can find on iTunes, or on Libsyn, smashfiction.libsyn.com, which is a show where we take fictional characters and put them into situations where they have to come into conflict and hilariously debate who would win and for what reasons. And we got Malcolm Reynolds versus Han Solo coming up this Sunday. Is our matchup for Smash Fiction. So you can hear all of us talk about, whether the Millennium Falcon is better than Serenity.
Of course it is. And not even close.
Actually, yeah, you're totally right about that. And I was on Team Mel.
I can see why you would be, but there's no way that ship is better than the Falcon. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I want to. I really there's stuff in the episode about that, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But the Mal versus Han episode's coming out this Sunday. It's a really good show. This will be our 42nd episode. 41st. Sorry, 41st episode, and we intersperse. Yeah, we're coming up on a year, man. It'll be a year, August 1st. We've been doing Smash Fiction, and we also do once a month we do an actual play RPG podcast, which is kind of in lieu of that week's regular edition of Smash Fiction, we do we play an RPG, which is an invention of my friend Dan, who's also a co-host. It is called Extraordinary League. We play characters from whatever we want, basically in fiction with limitations, of course. I keep trying to get him to let me play Dr. Manhattan. He won't let me. What are you going to do?
I need to listen to those. But I'm a regular. I listen to that show regularly, but I really need to listen to that. We
use the 80s Marvel superheroes RPG to play the game, and kind of a homebrewed version of that. And until recently I was playing Sterling Archer because it was just fun. But in the next episode, which comes out not this Sunday, but next Sunday, I will be debuting my new character that I'm going to be playing for a little while because I love Archer, but I'm going to take a break from him and actually play a character from the Runaways. And I won't say which one, but a character from the Runaways will be joining that crew. So check that out. It's on iTunes. We're on Facebook and Tumblr and Twitter at SmashFic Podcast. And and then there's some other stuff too. You can go to AmericanPeanutGallery.wordpress.com for some rantings from my friends and I about various shit, mainly political stuff. That's kind of a really new thing, so it's not. I kind of feel weird even plugging it right now. I've been doing it on Unspoiled because I got really excited about it, but it's not quite ready for prime time. But whatever, it's published, it's online, it's fun, and so AmericanPeanutGallery.wordpress.com. And that's about it.
I definitely know the feeling on that because I've titled this our 1/2 episode because Maggie and I haven't really been able to actually start it proper yet. But I'm very glad you were able to come on here, and it was a lot of fun. I'm glad we finally got to talk about how.
I'm happy we finally got to do this.
So we'd love to have you back again sometime to talk about some other thing you're super excited about. So
anytime, man.
Definitely. All right, thank you. If you have to go now, I understand, but I'm just going to let everyone know. All right, thanks, Miles.
Yep.
If you enjoyed this video, you guys can check us out on, let's see, What's Goin Show is our Twitter. What's Goin with Owen and Maggie is our account on Tumblr. You can follow that where we post various cool Tumblr-y stuff. And Facebook.com/What's Goin with Owen is the name of our What's Goin page on Facebook. So you can also find us on YouTube where I upload these episodes at youtube.com/What's Goin Show. And I may be making this a podcast. I don't really know. I need to learn how to do that. So thank you for watching/listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks.